All right, this presentation is on an on-farm nitrate testing project. And I want to start by saying it was prepared by Heyden, our Livestock and Feed Extension Specialist out of the Moose Jaw office. It just stuck with me in terms of the presentation piece. If there are any hard questions, I will give you Adrian's number and we will call her after. So, as livestock specialists, we get quite a few calls on nitrates. There's issues with nitrates in terms of animal welfare and feeding, so that's where most of those questions come from for our group. So we have this lovely cow, and she's going to eat some nitrate feed, and typically that nitrate is going to be converted into nitrite in the rumen, and that's not a problem, she can do that. But the problem, and then it's going to be converted to ammonia, also again, not a problem. And then we use that ammonia to make some protein, keep those rumen microbes happy. But when we have excess nitrate going into that cow and going into that rumen, we have an overproduction of nitrite. So what happens is we have this excess nitrite that can't be absorbed, can't be converted into ammonia, and so it goes into the bloodstream. And what it does is it reduces the oxygen carrying capacity of the red blood cells. So under low levels, what we notice sometimes is that reduced feed intake, sometimes reduced milk production. At higher levels, we're going to see things like labored breathing, kind of staggering, increased salivation, sometimes abortions in those cows. And then in severe cases, we can end up with suffocation and death. Oh, that must be her dying, I guess. I also don't know all the animations in this presentation. So, careful. We also have, plant growth is affected by stress, we know that. And any type of stress, and nitrate is going to accumulate during those stress points. So is it frost? And that's probably the one where we get the most questions about as livestock specialists would be under those frost conditions. Hail is also going to cause stress to that plant, as well as drought. And then we have plants that love nitrate, so they are great nitrate accumulators. So cereals, especially under, I would say, hail conditions, so these are or drought conditions where we're salvaging these crops, those are sometimes where we'll see the highest nitrate. Kochia and other weeds, also great at accumulating nitrate. And the brassica species. So a lot of those species that are used in some of those polycrop mixtures. So canola, turnips, kale, radish, those types of things, great at accumulating nitrate. The other one that's not on this list, but that I would add would be corn, because it's also really good at nitrate accumulation. So it varies by plant species, stage of growth, nitrogen availability in the soil, and then we can impact that as well by insect and disease pressure, because again, that's a stress, and we impact it in terms of weather. So we tell everybody you can't manage what you don't measure. Lots of times the calls that we get, producers are wanting to, especially if it's a salvage crop, they're wanting to turn cattle out to graze it, and they want to know if it's safe. And without a test, we don't know if it's safe or not, unfortunately. So, and those lab tests are the most reliable, but they take at least 2 days to get the results back. That doesn't include your time to get that sample to the lab, or for the producer to get it to you. It costs about $25, so it's not a terrible price. If you add nitrate on to an existing package, it's lower. It's about, I would say, $15 to $17 to add it on to a package. And then packing up that sample and sending it out, that's part of that time. So I would say it's probably taking about 4 days from the time that sample gets to your office, or to a regional office, and then gets packaged up, sent out, gets to the lab, and that producer gets results back. So what producers would like, and what we would like for them to have, and for us to have available to us as well, would be some sort of quick test. Would there be a field type or a field side test that we could do that would give us results more quickly, so that producers would know if it was safe to turn those cattle out? of you that are in the room that are maybe as old as me, or a little bit older, might remember the sulfuric acid test. So these used to be done in the Saskatchewan regional offices years ago. However, it was frowned upon when livestock and forage specialists were using sulfuric acid in the kitchen. So no longer allowed, we don't do them. We get calls every year from producers saying, can I bring this in for a quick test? I know you do that. We haven't done that for at least 16 years. So no, you can't bring that in, I'm very sorry. There's also a strip test that some places will use as well. The problem, and with your sulfuric acid test, you're either going to get yes or no. It's not going to tell you the percentage, so you have no idea how to manage those nitrates that are there. With the strip test, it's only about 60% accurate. So how risk averse are you, or how willing are you to take that risk? And the longer the producers wait, the more stored feed that they're going through, waiting for that answer, or they risk grazing a crop that's potentially unsafe. So if we had some type of accurate, quick test, that would be great. So Adrienne did a little bit of research. She found a project that was done by Olds College where they looked at a couple of different options. So one of them is called a Nessie kit, and then the Heriba nitrate meter. So from Olds College, their initial results showed or suggested that the Nessie, which is the one with all those weird little bottles, looks similar to a sulfuric acid test, was fairly accurate. The Heriba was a little bit more accurate, and both of these are safer than the sulfuric acid test. The Nessie kit was a little bit more cumbersome to use. So Adrienne decided that when they did this project, that they were going to look just at that Heriba meter. So, and with the results from Olds College, what they found was that their initial project just looked at 25 samples, which isn't a huge sample size, but they only had one out of those 25 that was significantly different between what the Heriba told them and what the lab test showed them. So that was encouraging, right? So here was their project plan. So this originally was supposed to be in 2024 during the growing season. So the group was going to find 200 samples of standing crop from the Moose Jaw, Humboldt, Weyburn, and Swift Current regions. So they took a representative sample from each of the fields that they visited. So they were taken at multiple locations across the field, cut at the level that either the swather would swath it or the cows would graze it. And then samples were cut into smaller pieces, mixed in a pail, and then put into a bag. And then that sample would be split. Half of it would be used with that nitrate meter, the other half was going to go to the lab to compare the results. So they were using down-to-earth lab at a Lethbridge, so they will do I believe it's parts per million on the nitrate analysis, and we were just doing nitrate testing on those. So the plan initially was to juice these field samples with a garlic press. That is what Olds College did, so that was the protocol that was followed. And then they're going to use that juice to test the meter, and then again, they're going to use half for testing, half goes to the lab, and they were going to categorize both the samples tested on a meter and the samples coming back from the lab as safe, cautionary, or unsafe. And different labs will test or will report nitrate in different ways. This is also really important when talking to producers because sometimes they don't realize that. So some labs will report in nitrate, and they might report nitrate as a percent. They might report nitrate as parts per million. Other labs will report in nitrate nitrogen, and again, percent or parts per million. And some will report as potassium nitrate. So it's important to know, at least on our end when we're talking to producers, which type of nitrate analysis was actually done. Because the levels, those safe and then maximum levels are different depending on the type of nitrate analysis that's been done. So they took their garlic press out to the field. And they broke the garlic press on the first sample at the first field that they went to. And then they broke another one. So, plants that are drought stressed are really hard to squeeze moisture out of. Garlic press is not the way to go, apparently. Kochia, almost impossible. And the brassica leaves, those were pretty good. So they could use the garlic press on the brassica leaves, but it didn't really work very well for anything else. So then what they did was they acquired some power tools. The Elfies love power tools. A stronger garlic press, so they decided to contact Wolds College and say, what type of garlic press were you using? And then they bought the same one and experienced similar results as they did the first time in the field. So then what they did was they got a little blender, blended up these samples so that they could get some juice. And then some of them, they were too dry, even when they blended them. So they added an equal amount of water as what they had feed for those ones, so that they had some sort of liquid that they could test. So here's where it gets a little bit confusing, and if you have questions, we're asking Adrian, because I've already asked her a few today about this. So here's what happened. So they have the results from the meter. So safe results, 148 for the meter, but when sent to the lab, only 119 of those were safe. Those cautionary ones, about 16 of them showed that cautionary zone on the meter, but 30 of them from the lab. And then with those unsafe samples, 1 using the meter, but 16 using the lab. So we can see that there's a little bit of a discrepancy there. And certainly, we don't want to tell a producer that something is safe to use and then end up that it's not, and they lose livestock, because that wouldn't be very good. So they found that they had about 19% that were false negatives, about 79% were actually the correct recommendation, and about 2% ended up being false positives. So when they took these, so the lab will give, I think they started, there's a certain detectable limit where they can't measure if something is below that. So that's your BDL, below detectable limit. So they had 42 of those samples. Of those samples, the meter had quantified 28 of those as less than 1,000, so that would be considered safe on the meter. 12 of them as cautionary, and then 2 of them as unsafe. But that's all fine and good, except that we're comparing dry matter basis to as fed. So in livestock, we always work on a dry matter basis. So Adrian tried to go in and figure out, so if this was done on a dry matter basis, what would those numbers look like? So depending on and not all of the samples are included in here. I think there's not, I don't know if not all of the results are here or what happened there, but you will see some discrepancies in the numbers. But I think there's still a take-home message here. So again, we had higher numbers from the lab that were considered safe, about the same for that cautionary zone. And then this one was kind of the opposite. We've got 30 that were considered unsafe when we used the meter, and 10 from the lab. And things are kind of opposite again. So we have false negatives, I think on the previous slide were around 18 or 19%, and false positives were around 5. So this time our false negatives are around 4%, and those false positives around 18%. So still at that 78% that were the correct recommendation. So I think that is sort of encouraging. And then there's 36 of the samples from the lab that had that below detectable limit notification. So of those, we had about 19% that the meter had also said, yeah, those are safe. 36% that were in that cautionary zone, and then 44% that the meter actually considered them unsafe. So again, you're telling, if we assume that it's unsafe and the producer can't use it, it's lost production for them. So we just want to be accurate in the information that we're giving them. this work as well as it did for the olds? Did we do something wrong? Well, we didn't have the right garlic press to start with, but they wondered if part of it is diverse plant samples. So I'm not sure the olds project, if it was all cereals that they were testing, whereas this one was pretty, if a producer phoned and they were concerned about nitrate levels, the livestock specialist went out and tested whatever it was. So it might have been a cereal crop, it might have been kosher, it might have been something else. So that's one thing that they thought maybe played into that. It was also difficult to juice those plants and get enough of that juice for the meter to work properly, because you have to put some on the meter, then you have to clean it off, then you have to put some on again, and then you have to clean it off, and you have to get 2 samples, 2 in a row that are similar to each other before you consider it an accurate reading. So I think they ran out of juice quickly, and the other problem with the meters was that they would calibrate them, and they wouldn't make it through very many samples before they were no longer calibrated, and they would have to recalibrate. So that was also an issue with them. So that would be an issue too if producers were trying to use something like that, and you maybe don't realize that it's not calibrated properly, or that you're gonna have to calibrate it after you take a few samples. And the samples that were quite high in nitrates seemed to be difficult to measure. And we found a similar thing with the regional offices used to have handheld water meters, and it was the same thing. They worked great as long as conductivity was below 1500. But if conductivity was over 1500, results were all over the place. So sort of similar, those ones where the result is really high, then the actual level of nitrate there was quite variable. It was hard to get to know what it was. And I do believe this project was done with the Saskatchewan Forage Council, so thank you. And questions, Adrienne very nicely put her email address in here. I will try to answer if you have a question, but we'll see. That's it. Oh, yeah.
Have you tried any other devices like the meter, but I know that all that the company is making like some sort of like calorimeters and test strips and it's like reading them for you?
So we didn't, not in this project, they didn't try anything else. I think part of it was budgetary, part of it is maybe bringing some of that stuff in. There's another project that our livestock specialists are also working on using prussic acid. That one is a test strip. So we are trying those out in a different project. This better be easy.
Just wondering if water samples were taken alongside the feed samples to see if there was, like cumulatively nitrates would be an issue, or if it focused only on.
I don't think so. Like I think they just did forage analysis for nitrates, because yeah, and it would depend, right, on whether or not they were going to be using it in the winter and we're on, say, well water, or whether they were actually gonna, if the plan was to put up a fence and graze it and had access to water there. So no, they didn't include that in the project. But good question. Yep.
Do you know what all the different types of feed were tested?
No. Short answer is no. I can tell from the presentation that they tested kochia, they tested those polycrops because they had brassica species that they said worked really well with garlic press, and then cereal crops, which I assume would be probably barley and oats for the most part. Yes?
So for those samples that have been to the lab, do you know how those samples transport? Is there like a full Wright sample, or is there a physical sample?
Let me see. I think Adrienne told me that. The samples were refrigerated until they were ready to go into the lab. Thank you.
is going to be spent with a panel discussion and a strategic discussion. I'm going to invite our panel members up. I'm not going to introduce everybody because I'm going to let them do that themselves. Some of you guys may be aware, some of you may not, but there is a Forage initiative that was developed in 2010. So that was 15 years ago. The forage industry, just like everything else, has changed drastically over the course of the last 15 years. And that's what this discussion is going to be focused around. The importance of forages, what's happening in the industry right now, and where we want to see the industry go in the future. So I'm going to invite Dale to up here. He's going to moderate for us. He has so graciously offered to moderate for us. And then following our panel discussion, Hillary is going to be leading a short roundtable discussion so we can have a more one-on-one discussion with it before we part for the day. So I'm going to hand this over to Dale.
Do we need another chair?
Thank you very much, Joanne, for that introduction. I'm Dale Zula, Virtual Specialist for Forages with the Ministry of Agriculture. And I'm going to be your moderator this afternoon with this group. I just thought everyone's been asking me what's wrong with me. Kathy mentioned already that I asked her to do the impossible with an economics thing on rejuvenation. So I think she's got a close relationship with God and said, can you fix him up a bit? Anyhow, thanks for coming out today. I hope that we'll get some good discussion here this afternoon, and following this we'll have some roundtable discussions as well. And essentially what we're trying to do is look at different thoughts and ideas with respect to a provincial forage strategy, trying to develop one. The Sask Forage Council is considering looking at new ideas to keep relevant and in line with the rest of the industry. So with that, I'm going to ask each of the panelists here this afternoon to firstly introduce themselves and say who they're with, and also a bit of a brief thought on what they think about forage strategy. So I'll just hand this mic over to them here.
Hi, thanks for having me here. I'm Marianne Possber. I am the research analyst for the Saskatchewan Cattle Association. My thoughts on the forage strategy. Can't say too much about that right now. I feel like I haven't read it recently enough. So I guess my go-to thoughts are we need research that occurs after we communicate with a significant amount of producers, and being able to do that can be a struggle at times. And then on top of it, we need a good communication strategy to deliver those results. So I think if it's based on those principles, then we've got a good way forward. But I also want to note that we need to understand where the seed is coming from, how much it's going to cost, and some of the opportunities or opportunity costs of producers as well. Not only cattle producers, but also crop producers. So that's my thoughts.
All right. My name is Tracy Evans. I'm the Executive Director for Regional Services Branch with the Ministry of Agriculture. Thanks for having me here today. My background at a personal level, I think you'd ask, how are we involved with the industry? Cow-calf producer background on a personal level. We no longer have cow-calf operation, but it's still near and dear to my heart. And then obviously on the career side, 25 years is with the Ministry of Agriculture, half of that as a livestock and feed specialist. So that's my background. I have the pleasure of working with people like Jen, who was just up here. the other question or aspect that you're looking for is about what we would like to see in a forage strategy going forward. And I think what comes to mind for me is that we need to keep in mind the broader goals of sustainability, innovation, and competitiveness as we think about what needs to come forward. Within regional services, which across the Ministry of Agriculture, we're using kind of 3 words specifically as the lens to kind of keep in mind of what we're trying to achieve. And we need to be relevant, responsive, and resilient. And that's really kind of in the guideposts of how the lens that I've been using in thinking about how we move forward. So a couple of examples would be ensuring that we're developing and promoting forage management practices that improve yield, have nutritional value, and resilience to climate variability. Another example, I think, is supporting the breeding and selection of new forage cultivars that meet market and livestock needs. I think further to Ken, his comments about ensuring that carbon sequestration, encouraging practices that maintain improved soil health, water retention, and biodiversity. So 3 important aspects that I think that theme runs through many of the program, our RELP program that's out there that's been mentioned a few times. It's very consistent across all of the industry. So I think when we're thinking about that forage strategy moving forward, those need to be some of those priorities or guideposts as we move along.
Good afternoon. My name is Kevin Steinley. I'm the president of the Sask Forage Council and also a livestock and hay producer. I farm with my brother in the middle of the Rush Lake Irrigation Project. So we're surrounded by 5,000 acres of irrigated hayland, of which we have about 500 of. I grew up on a dairy farm, so I learned pretty early about the value of having a steady supply of high quality forage, and learned a lot about forages and hay production from that. So, I mean, the forages, we feed livestock, we have a small cow herd, and we also do sell a lot of hay as well. I also have worked in the watershed world for about the last 10 years, working on a lot of the programs that help promote forage seeding. Excuse me. As far as the strategy goes, the forage industry is really the main support for a lot of industries in the province. You know, that being the cow-calf, feedlot, the dairy industry, bison, sheep, goats, horses. I'm looking for the forage industry to help support these industries, help them grow, and I think it's more important now, considering the prices that we're seeing in the cattle industry, for sure, that that we supply, that there's enough supply there to be able for producers to stay in business, and be able to grow and also to keep their costs down. Because no matter how high the prices are, you're always better off in farming when you keep your prices down. So, and I'm also looking at the forage strategy to, hopefully we keep acres, expand all types of forage to support these industries, which help to keep operations sustainable, keep the industry sustainable, and also, as has been mentioned, to improve the landscape.
Thank you, Kevin. My name is Scott Wright. I'm currently director of the Livestock and Forage Center of Excellence. My roadmap back in forages openly runs all the way back to BC, working as a forage technician for Agriculture Canada. Coming out of Saskatchewan in 1983, working for Dr. Roger Coe in a Termundi research farm, forage research program. Agriculture Canada, Saskatchewan, there's a grass breeder. I'm working on the early programs that now Bill alluded to is shepherding. From there to Melfort, where I started as a forage management researcher with Dwayne McCartney and Shabtai Bittman and some of those names that you'll remember. Became the director of the Melfort Research Station and downsized it in 1995. moving the livestock program to Lacombe to be able to make sure that we still have an animal-plant interaction research program in Agriculture Canada in Western Canada. From there on to the, yeah, I know, you're right. Yeah, Clue is going, what a moron. And it's true, the things we've had to do. From Lacombe, from Melfort, I moved down to Lacombe. They're co-chaired the Western Forage Beef Group, which was a federal, provincial industry partnership. Some of the same outcomes that we have in Saskatchewan. Sorry, I'm getting it short, I promise. From there back to Saskatchewan, crop development branch, from crop development branch into the Feeds Innovation Institute, working on co-products, feed co-products, and those opportunities. From there, it continues. And so I worked with PFRA. I've been responsible for the development centers, again with a forage component built in. And finally back home in the Livestock and Forage Center of Excellence at that interface. Why a strategy? And so openly in the early 80s, we talked here about a strategy focused on non-loading legumes. You'll recall the alfalfa, the Lyra alfalfas, the low-loading residues, the Low Care 4511, the work that was targeted on something, right? And what it did is it focused resources in a major way. That's a program that came out of working with producers, listening to producers, and priorities that were coming from the land up, and the effort to focus our fire on something that a number of disciplines could work together in moving forward. And so that's where I want to start. A roadmap to me, a strategy to me is just a roadmap, right? And openly, without a path to follow, anyone works, right? Without an outcome you're intending to do, you can pick any path and get there, right? But a strategy makes you pull that together. Absolutely, Marianne, it's about working with industry, it's about working with research capacity, it's about working with funders to have the conversations early on. What is it that we can, should, and would focus on? Right? It's built on a foundation. That foundation, and folks like BCRC, Minister of Agriculture, and ADF priorities, SCA priorities, SSGA priorities. There's some great priority setting out there. What does it mean for Saskatchewan? Right? And what does it mean when you try and create a level of detail that says, in the black soil zone for forages, we should focus in this space? Right? The problem with strategies is there's always winners and losers. But again, to me, the idea is to drive it down, proactively to a level where we understand where we want to focus. Saskatchewan has some of the most incredible, innovative producers that try all kinds of great new stuff. Right? Can we help shape that? We have world-class researchers. Openly, we've got researchers that can do anything in this province. Clue, thank you very much. Put your hand up. As one represented between the university, from the university to the federal government to some private industry folks that are around, we have the capacity and the facilities to do it. Right? We have the land base, the animals, the plant opportunities, and more than that, I would argue the forage community, building into the livestock community, understands more about collaboration in Saskatchewan than any other province we've got out there. We get how to work together. And that's what this strategy begins to help us build and help us direct. When we talk about the things that are there, and I'm the first one to talk about a continuum that takes us from soil science and forage breeding all the way through to problem alleviation and investing on what are the issues of today. What do we do about drought? But it's not about doing a little bit for all of those things. In the end, it's tough conversations around the table saying, we've got research, we've got new researchers coming forward. Amazing folks that have brilliant ideas as a way of moving forward. And are they going to get traction? Do they have a reference point? Can we move beyond individualistic and kind of, frankly, quick-sighted views of what we really need next to something that we agree on collectively to focus on and move forward? In the strategy, we include things, yes, like forage breeding, like breeding outcomes, not just a breeding program. Breeding outcomes. Are we going to work on saline species that can fix nitrogen under multiple conditions? It's a bit of targeting that conversation. It's support to producers, support to seed growers. It's recognizing that we have the cataclysm events around us of drought and flood and all of that stuff that goes on. So how collectively do we build a collaboration proactively so researchers aren't out there trying to do 22 research proposals a year? They're doing one, targeted at something that we've agreed we can work together on. It is an absolute partnership. It is government, Minister of Agriculture. Oh, I forgot my group, and I've got it right here, right? Saskatchewan has an extension service. An unbelievably powerful, excellent extension service. We are left as the only province in Canada that does have that. Extension is part of that process. So we build on the pillars of industry and producers, we build on the pillars of government, and we build on the pillars of the university and research capacity and federal government that we've got here, pulling that into a collective view. That, in my idea, is how we build a strategy.
Thanks for that, Scott. And actually, that kind of it's kind of a segue into my first question here for this afternoon, and which really deals a lot with the research side of things. And essentially, like Scott mentioned, we largely are go-to for research is at the university level in Ag Canada, and you know, for the most part, that's where we go. And the question is the information that comes out from the researchers coming out in a format that's useful, that's easily to adopt, and how do we make that knowledge transfer? What's the best way to make that knowledge available to growers? So, if you want to expand on that, perhaps, Scott?
Thank you. And so I want to start at a place, and it's to say, 20 years ago, those same questions were asked and worked on. Openly, what BCRC has on their website now, we have a foragebeef.ca process, which was the same kind of concept. What's the topic? What are the key takeaways? And what's the depth if you really want to drive down and look at specific research projects relative to it? That's one event, but not everybody is great at diving on the website. But what I want to reinforce is we don't want to replicate, we don't even want to duplicate what's already in place. BCRC's got some web stuff that works extremely well. Now let's add into that. And I've got the extensionist, I'm going to emphasize it again. That is the ultimate exchange between information and researchers. I would review this question a little bit to push back and say, how do we make sure the extensionists have the access to the researchers and research projects so that they have the information to move out there? We have researchers, direct research communications that are very good, and we have direct research communications that struggle a little more. Kathy's a tremendous example, and she's already left, so I'm not blowing smoke, right? It does a great job of translating the science to what the industry and producers need to use. We use field days, multiple field days, be they facility-based or by organization. There are multiple ways of moving information, and to me, that's the bottom line. Do we have lots to choose from? If we want to learn one-on-one, if we want to learn in a group, if we want to learn online, that's where I think the answer to this question lies. How do we make sure it's available in multiple formats for multiple different needs?
Yeah, I think you're right there, Scott, is how do we get that information to the end users? I find with the work that I've done and also being a producer is that it's awfully hard to get that information to the end users. It's sitting there. We always seem to have some sort of a roadblock or something that they just can't find that information. So it's going to be a way to get there. To boil it down into simple for people to understand and use. And I think maybe the other thing that I think is some more field scale trials that are closer to what producers are doing rather than being research projects. They're more tailored to show producers how the changes they can make and that they can be scaled to their operations.
Thanks for that, Kevin. the rally cry for extension. I had the opportunity to attend the Carry Conference in Guelph, Ontario last week, and I think what was resoundingly is how I came out of there feeling incredibly grateful for the fact that we have extension and we are where the rest of the nation, frankly, would love to be. They were just begging for the opportunity to have extension. So, thanks, appreciate that. We are very lucky, and it's been key to the answer for, I think, the question that you're coming in, or that's been presented. You know, how is that information useful coming out of there? Well, we have amazing research facilities like the Livestock Forage Center of Excellence. We have researchers like Kathy who are out there doing the ROI just because you're walking right in the door as an opportunity. We're incredibly fortunate to have the stakeholders that are there to ensure that their funding for research has an extension component as part of the requirements that they deliver on, just as we do with AEF, with ADOPT, our SFP. Those are all designed to keep the end user in mind, which is our producer. How is the information that is, or how is the big question that's being researched going to be useful for our producers, farmers, ranchers, agribusinesses of Saskatchewan? So just really making sure that that information has that pathway, and our extension staff are a key part of that. But I think there's also opportunities where we partner with, as Scott said, BCRC. Our staff contribute to the development of the tools and the information that BCRC creates. Then our extension staff are able to grab hold of those tools and spend the time out there with the producer, as opposed to spending all of the time in the office trying to develop them. So really it comes across as incredible collaboration between university, the researchers, the research facilities, like what Scott's got going on, ensuring that we've worked with our stakeholders, and then of course with our producers, like Kevin and all of the rest that are out there that take a keen interest in what is needed. And so ensuring that we're doing the right research for the right audience, and that what we're going to do has a return on investment.
Thanks. So I agree with Tracy. I think what we have here, as far as making sure that we've got the right research for the people who need it, I think that we've kind of set ourselves up quite nicely in this province. And I really appreciate all of the steps that it took to have the Agriculture Development Fund and the commodities that can come in to give their support, but again, the fact that we've got regional specialists across the province that can also give that feedback there. Are we doing enough on knowledge transfer though? Probably not. And I think there's a few issues in that. But there's also been some solutions that I've seen recently too. So I sit on the Saskatchewan Pasture Tour Planning Committee. And this past year, what I really appreciated that Shalane did, she made it a point of making sure that producers were at that meeting. What can we do to make sure that meetings, perhaps not like this, it's not necessarily a producer-focused meeting, but what are we doing to make sure that we've got as many producers in the room as possible? Because I like being invited to the meeting, but it's what the producer is going to do after they leave the meeting. So do we need to start, as Shalane did, do we need to start contacting the 4-H beef teams? What can we do to communicate that these meetings happen through that avenue? What can we do to, to be honest, I feel like there are avenues there, but it's not coming to the top of my head. We need to be creative in figuring out how to get the producer to those meetings to begin with. Because we do have the BCRC website, and I think it's a really great tool, but producers sometimes don't even know that that website exists. So creating opportunities to make sure that they know about it is useful. And then the other side of it is, what are we doing to communicate to those producers when they get to the meetings? So having a situation or having meetings that they feel interested in showing up at. A lot of producers like being on the land, like learning from each other, talking to each other, but you do need to talk to the researchers themselves. And perhaps a lot of the ways that researchers communicate is not going to be very easy for others to pay attention to. So I guess the story that I go back on these days is a grad student that came to visit producers when we were at Acre Vision. I was in the booth, and there were a couple of producers there. We had a grad student that came in to just kind of describe what she was doing to try to get more ideas about what she can do to improve her project. And she was talking to a couple of producers who actively promoted the funding of her work. And she went about talking about it in a normal academic way, and their eyes glazed right over. And these are the people, out of all the producers in the country, these are the producers that would be the most interested in their project. So after she did that, we had lunch with her, and we advised her to say, okay, rather than talking about all of the academic work that you're going to do, what are the problems, here are the surveys that I'm going to put together, and here's the methodology for them, and then here's the results that are going to come out of it. Why don't we reverse the script? Why don't you say, I want to do this for your farm because we need to solve X problem. And keep it to 2 minutes and let the producer ask you the questions instead. And obviously this is different when it comes to a presentation because you can't give a 2-minute presentation, but you can extrapolate from that. What can we do to perhaps leave some of the minute detail behind and give producers up front the reason why they should pay attention, and then let them ask all the questions later, so that at the very least they get the take-home message right away, rather than letting them sit through a lot of very academic data that they're gonna unfortunately kind of glaze over for. The phone is gonna get picked up and they're gonna miss the end result there. So there's that. There's also a really great presentation through the BCRC Knowledge Tech Transfer Hub, and they had someone presenting, John Henwood, who noted that you do need to have a story to go along with these conversations too. And I think Jen did a really great job in her previous presentation, just to talk about what the story is. She put a nice, lovely amount of humor into it. It's obvious that she's kept her job for so long because obviously you know how to communicate with producers. So I know that this is a stretch for a lot of researchers, and it's scary to go out on your own, and I definitely said a lot of jokes that fell incredibly flat over the years. But nevertheless, it is worth trying to connect to producers through stories and through understanding where they're at, rather than pretending that they're going to listen to an academic presentation for a half hour. So
just with that, Mary, like to kind of carry on with that a little bit. I think Kathy probably hit on that this morning too when she talked about imperial and method. The language, the researchers have a different language than the layman goes out in the field. And I think people learn best by hands-on and by visual. And so things like adopt, for example, that kind of thing, maybe is that the way to go with the transfer of knowledge, would you say? Or
I think adopt is one of the methods that can be used. I know that there are financial and time limitations to doing an adopt project. I mean, you're relying on a lot of regional specialists to be able to pick up on that research, and there's often just a lack of resources to do that too.
And the language too, like it's highly scientific language that comes out from the researchers that many people don't even understand. So that interpretation is probably a factor too.
Just
what Marianne and Dale are talking about here, and the language and helping research become that much more understandable and relatable for the producer. At the LFCE table, one of the ideas that came forward, and BCRC's got a similar program, and Jen is involved with that, but it's a mentorship between an extension person and a researcher. And this is an area that we're looking to further implement so that all of the researchers have that conduit to the producer. Because if they can't reach out to the producer to find out, you know, how do I frame my project so that it becomes that relatable information, and how do I know how it applies to me? That's where our extension staff come in, and that's that important relationship. So I think there's opportunities for those types of mentorships, and really, I hate to use the word mentorship because it's actually not one learning from the other, it's mutual learning. So maybe we just switch mentorship to mutual learning and partner as opposed to mentorship, but just that opportunity to capitalize on the shared.
I want to make a quick comment on it. And that's to observe that in any population there are those that are natural communicators. I am not. Right? I came through the research side of things, and I would rather look at my shoes than yours as a way of actually trying to see what's going on. Right? And so there are those that will never be the kind of communicator that the producer wants. There's the opportunity to work with extensions. There's the opportunity to work with people who can really help with that space. Clue, forgive me, but I don't know any researcher that can't benefit by working with extensions to be able to move that information out better.
And I do want to point out that there is technology that helps right now. So when we have a quarterly newspaper, and I've got a lot of final research summaries from researchers, I use AI. I plug it into AI and I ask it, can you please summarize this in grade 10 English for agriculture producers? And it spits out 350 words for me. I still have to go through it and make sure that it's accurate and that it's got the details in there that I usually want, because it never brings up the economics of the paper. It's very frustrating. But it's helpful. I mean, it's a really great tool. You can use it on your presentations as well. It still means that you've got to do the awkwardness of presenting it in front of a bunch of people, but it really does simplify that work quite a bit.
So yeah, I guess the next question, you guys can all hear me, can't you? Okay, I guess I'm told. And we all know what's kind of coming out in terms of research for forages to some degree. We all follow that. Everyone here has an interest in that. And just the next question pertains to whether or not you think we are on the right track to the research of forages. Are we doing the right things, or is there something that's being missed along the line, like something different that needs to be done? So with that, I'll turn it over to you first, Scotty.
That's dangerous. Are we conducting the right kinds of things in terms of research? I want to tell you about a little research project that's going on. So Dr. Bart Lardridge started a research project at LFCE, and I think it was 6 years ago now, maybe 7 years ago. It was a 3-year ADF project, and it was targeted at looking at simple mixtures, annual versus perennial grazing systems, and it was about production. It was what do we get off it? That was the funding that was available under that circumstance. Openly, because of some of the donation opportunities that had come into LFCE, we were able to add elements onto that. So Bart's grazing project on annual versus perennial species in a grazing system became one that looked at soil microbiome, soil health, plant productivity and diversity, animal productivity, greenhouse gas emissions, and water relations underneath that pasture. That's the kind of integrated research that I think yields answers beyond the original question. And to me, being able to do that kind of research is absolutely fundamental. It begins to speak to the kind of landscape scale work that you're talking about, rather than 4 by 20 foot plots. Sorry, I can do that in years if I try. But rather than 4 by 20 foot plots, we're talking about 15-acre plots. And we're talking about animals on the landscape and their impact. And so to me, are we doing the right? I think we're absolutely headed in the right direction. Are we missing things? To me, there's a really cool piece that's happening out there. How many of you absolutely believe in multi-species seeding and grazing? Seeding multiple species, throwing the mixes in the ground, yeah. And so to me, the answer to that question has to be, what do you want from it? What goal are you trying to achieve? Right? Because fundamentally, if you're looking at even short-term versus long-term economics, you get a different answer. If you're looking at whether you're improving soil health or contributing to the short-term economics in your grazing system, you get a different answer. And so fundamentally, to me, the research has the opportunity to say, what's the outcome that we're trying to answer, right? And how do we build that process? The multi-species one, hopefully I'll bring it up, because for 100 years, I argued that the best way to maximize the utilization of a perennial piece of ground is to have known species doing known things when you know you can actually utilize them to the maximum. Right? I also like crested wheatgrass, I'll admit that. Right? But you know you use it in the spring, you know you use it when it rains, you know you can reuse it in the fall, and you know it's got 10 to 15 years of etiolated growth in the roots. Right? It's perennial species that were selected in Saskatchewan, varieties that were driven out under Saskatchewan drought conditions, and has an extremely high water use efficiency. Right? What do we know when we're putting 22 species in the ground? Over half the time in Saskatchewan, we're at a water deficit. Is that correct? Right? Over half the time, we're limited by the amount of moisture in our production system. How do we make sure we're applying science into some of these? There's some great concepts there. How do we make sure we apply the science into, say, we're all using highly efficient, high water use efficiency? And so to me, it's an example where the technology has gotten out ahead of the science. Is that fair, Clue? Right? There's more ideas, there's more species can get thrown in, there's more theories around what's happening in the ground than science can prove or retain or build up. Is that wrong? No, absolutely not. We want to be out ahead and trying things. But I would keep coming back to say research is where we want to fail. Research is where we want to push the edge to make sure that we get the recs. Right? So that producers aren't experiencing the same thing. That to me is a critical opportunity for research, is to make sure we're testing those outside edges, the bleeding edges, where we bugger up and fail.
Well, thanks, Scott. Well, those are some really good points on research. For me, I think that for the most part, we are going down the right path with research. There's been a lot of work going into breeding of new varieties, new forage varieties. You look at the salt-tolerant grasses, salt-tolerant alfalfas, things of that nature. Has been really beneficial. And we're also, research into new grazing systems, rotational grazing, and changing, and how that can benefit producers in the landscape. And also there's been a lot of work going into the conservation of native grass, especially down our way. And I think as more research and more work goes into that, it will benefit, of a greater benefit. What I would like to see more of is research into more agronomy for forage crops. Ken had touched on it in his talk, but I don't know how many, in some cases maybe with the change in varieties and also the weather, changes in weather and the weather we've seen in the last few years, if some of those assumptions will still hold. So I do think that, as we move on, to get more research into agronomy and get that information out to producers to help them, with their operations and keep them more sustainable.
I like both of those responses. Are we on the right path? I would say yes. I think that I hope this question is a discussion question for this group, because frankly, you folks are the experts, you're in the field and talking with the producers, so I'd love to hear more about what you're thinking. But in terms of, my perspective, we've got the right people in the game. We've got researchers here at the U of S that are researching the right things. We're going down the path of sustainability options. I think what stands out for me is ensuring that there's a return on investment. As Kevin just mentioned about the annual forage crops and the agronomy on that, I think that's one of the areas that we get a lot of questions within the Agriculture Knowledge Center and in the regional offices. It's an area that is continually changing with the product registrations, the flexibility, and so there's a lot of other technologies that are coming in that area. So in my mind, I think that that's certainly room for more opportunity for research. Certainly, as I say that, Scott, that I'm not defining the research criteria, a little bit there. But we've got the right players in the game in terms of Dr. Flavia, Kathy, and Bart, and of course Dr. Bill too. So it's pretty awesome that we have those individuals. I think we need to keep working down that path of the sustainability with the element of return on investment has to be calculated in there, because without that, it doesn't matter what we take out to them, the producer's just not going to implement it if there isn't a return. So there has to be something in it.
Yeah. So, my job as the research analyst for the Saskatchewan Association is to work with the research committee of my board to evaluate projects so that we can provide feedback to the Ministry of Agriculture as they decide on funding projects, but also to fund them ourselves. Granted, for a much smaller amount of money, we've got $500,000, they've got $6 million for livestock and forage. So when we are looking at projects in the spring and the fall, I've noticed over the past 10 years that those research priorities can change between years and even within a year between the spring and the fall. So it can be difficult to say that we're in the right direction or wrong direction, knowing that producers at my table change quite a bit too. So just to reiterate what Scott said, there's going to be winners and losers in deciding which research priorities to go with. My area that I grew up in is around Humboldt, Saskatchewan, and driving from Regina to Humboldt every now and then, when you see all of the bare white soils that do not occur in the winter, you can understand why Ken would say that you would wait until the winter to sow those fields. But that also means that I'm very, very interested in saline tolerant for research. That being said, I think that there are a lot of producers who would say that there are regions that haven't been paid attention to as much, particularly in the northern areas around the tree line. We have just as many producers in that tree line up north as we do towards the south, and we are facing in our organization some frustration from the research from the producers in that area, who very much want more research. Hillary is nodding her head quite a bit, and I know that we're going to be putting more emphasis on paying attention to those producers in the coming years. So I know that we've had Flavia kind of meet with a few producers up north, and we're hoping to continue that in the spring. We're hoping to invite some researchers up north to meet more producers in that area, because I think that there's a lot there. In addition to the fact that they grow a lot of forage seed in northeast Saskatchewan too, and talking with Joanne from the Saskatchewan Seed Development Commission, she's raised a lot of alarms about some of the insects and the pest issues in that area too. So if we do want to get some of the seed that we're working so hard on breeding, then we need to kind of look at how that end product is going to get out. But I guess I do want to very much support all of the genomic mapping research that's kind of really ramped up to it, and I'm hoping to see a bit more of that, because when it comes to trying to get some of the forage crops growing, they're going to need a lot more consistency when they grow crops too.
Thanks, Marianne. I just want to try, I don't want to use the same routine all the time, so I'll move down here and start with you with this one maybe. And this next question actually is something that comes from a lot of different organizations and associations out there who ask the same question, and that is, are there enough, are there enough people coming up through the ranks to fill these research positions? And if not, what are the things that can be done to alleviate that? Are there any things that we can do to kind of help facilitate that movement? So we'll start with you.
Okay, yeah. I really appreciated this question, because I think that we've had some really great grad students go through the U of S, and then we wonder why aren't they staying? Oh geez, I had his name earlier today. I'm guessing you know his name. He was a grad student a couple of years ago. He was at Melbourne for a little while, and then he's not here anymore. But whenever he would join a call, you could count on him giving some really great questions, and then he always brought a lot to these conversations, and it was really disappointing that he wasn't able to stay in the industry. David, yes, absolutely. He was great. So it was really a pity when he wasn't able to stay. And so there is that side of understanding that perhaps there aren't enough opportunities in the area, and some of that can really only pick up after we develop a better forage industry to make sure that there are jobs available for people to do that work. But then we have to look at what we have, and I don't think it's a bad thing either. So, Clelo, your name has already been mentioned several times in this talk. You're gonna get mentioned, I'm sure, a few times. I mean, I look at the work that he's doing with Swift Current, and he might not be from Western Canada, but I think that he's been able to reach out to quite a few producers in the area. And Bill Billikatu also. I think when people in my research committee on my board think of him, they think of him in a very positive way, and we really appreciate all of the ways that he's reached out to people throughout our industry so that we can kind of move forward. And he's got very specific skills that we really have to appreciate. And when we've got this newer researcher, Flavia Van Cleef, when she was hired, especially because of the fact that the SCA partially funded her position, it was really an obligation of ours to ensure that she met as many producers as possible. And she's doing a lot of this work on her own, but it's also up to organizations like ours to ensure introduce her to people in the industry, and I know that Scott took her to the Saskatchewan tour as well. But we need to understand that currently we don't have a lot of people that want to stay in forage and forage research. And we can really value the expertise that is coming from a variety of areas in the world and take advantage of it and make sure that they do understand our industry. And I guess I want to point out, I'm from a beef and forage farm. They no longer have cattle, they still have forage. But that certainly doesn't mean that growing up in the industry that I know everything about the industry. There is a lot that I've had to learn through doing the work on my job. So we can benefit from people who aren't in this industry and really ensure that we're doing our part to make them understand the situations that we have throughout the province and throughout Western Canada. So, yeah.
So, in extension, I'm not directly involved with the hiring of the SRP chairs, or strategic research chairs, predecessors. And however, I did have a chance to talk to Sean Gibson, who is involved, our executive director of research branch. And he said, sitting on that committee, that they haven't had troubles attracting the right talent for those positions. And I think we look at the success that we've had with our current SRC chairs. In terms of, do we have individuals who are up and coming and ready to go? I think, what we need to keep in mind is that forage is cross-cutting across the animal science, the crops, and agronomy. And without training on forages in all three of those, I think we put ourselves at a disadvantage down the road. And so that would be my encouragement, is feedback for U of S, is just to ensure that when we are developing those animal science and crops and agronomy, that we intertwine the forage sector into all of those, because it is cross-cutting. And there, as an individual graduating with a degree in animal science, whether it be a degree, a master's, PhD, having that cross-cutting understanding, it's really that thread that kind of intertwines all of the agriculture sectors together for our industry. And so I think it's important that that's part of it. So.
Thanks. I think both Tracy and Marianne have pretty much said what I was, the same thing. I think the same way is that we do have a lot of good people here. Maybe we're not getting as many as we could, given that there's maybe not the interest or the money in forages that there is in other spots in agriculture. But I think keep trying to attract the best we can. And having a strategy to get to maybe where research is going and where the forage industry is going will help some people to make their decision about getting into research and forages a little easier.
Excellent comments. How many grad students do we have in here? Hands up, real high. Couple. Okay. How many extensionists do we have that don't have PhDs? Hands up. I think we have huge potential. Right, and so to me, do we have enough researchers, both homegrown and imported, that we're bringing in? And you mentioned Flavia, absolutely. Along with Flavia came her husband, who happens to be a forage researcher that we haven't even yet found a place for. Right, I think there's good research capacity all the way from our students. I think our researchers do a stunning job of bringing grad students along. Is there opportunity for building broader and more integrated research projects and programs? Absolutely. And that's where we can continue to build research capacity. But openly, extensionists, you don't have to do this for the rest of your life, sorry. There is opportunity for research beyond, right? And grad students, same deal. Where you end up with as a result of your grad student work takes you amazing places. And I know, frankly, researchers, be they at Canada, when you finish that? Oh, you're cutting me off. Thank you.
Carrie.
Thank you. boy, I work for cantankerous people. Let me tell you, she's one of my bosses, so that it works that way. And so I want to leave you with a thought. Researchers can develop. If you're interested, if you have curiosity, if you have the desire to reach down and find answers in the process, there is opportunity. And again, I just want to emphasize, I think the researchers we have done an amazing job of pulling young people along.
I get the feeling that everyone's kind of getting a little restless here, and I hope you bear with us. We're getting close to the last little bit of this, and so maybe we'll just carry on and complete that. Is that all right with everyone? All right. So next question is, what is the value of forages? And I think we all kind of know the value of forages per se, because everyone here is involved with forages to some degree. But what is the value of forages in agriculture? And what is the value leading into the future of forages in agriculture? And give us your thoughts on how to keep that value and increase the number of forages grown. And I think somebody actually talked about this earlier today. I think Ken did. So now it's just breathing into this, but I'll let you guys share your thoughts.
Thank you. I think ultimately the value of forages, it's the foundation to agriculture. Right? It provides sustainability on the landscape with the perennial species, provides a critical component of the agriculture and the agriculture space. And for those of you, I think it was 2010, the Saskatchewan Council published the value of forages in Saskatchewan. There's some low resolution versions that are available on the Saskatchewan Council and can be reached out. It's a template that brings in the value all the way from sustainability, landscape development, economic, social, environmental, and it's an opportunity to continue to build on that capacity. Bring it up to 2025 as part of the strategy.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. As I said before, I think the value in forages is supporting the livestock industry. I think if the last number of years have showed us anything, it's how the livestock inventories have mirrored the forage inventories, both kind of going like this. So if the livestock industry is going to expand, the forage supply needs to be expanded, needs to be increased, and we also need to change how it is used. How we, how it is, whether it's through extended grazing, rotational grazing, how stored forages are fed and used, what types are used for stored forages. Increasing the amount of forages is dependent on, I think, on price, honestly. How producers, especially the non-livestock producers, can get into the forage industry. So obviously there's the market, it's getting them in, getting started. We've had some talks today about, the producers looking on some of the land that they can't maybe physically farm because they can't get into and things like that. So how do they get into that business? How do they get into it, and how do they, and how do they market it as well? More information, I think, is, for them, they need more information on how forages and their rotation works. And the other thing is because, I've been involved in irrigation since I could walk, basically. So I think, for me, working with a group like Irrigation Saskatchewan to get more forage into the rotations under irrigation is huge. Because I think it helps them out, and definitely without getting, and getting some of that, forages, because as we've heard today, and we all know in this part of the world, water is our most limiting nutrient. So if you've got the ability to put forages, whether they're perennial, short-term perennials, or annuals under forage or under irrigation, that would make a huge difference in improving our forage supplies.
Thanks, Kevin. Actually, I'm going to kind of keep on with what Kevin's going with the opportunities that lie for forage ahead. Hillary had a really cool stat that she shared with me when we were having a discussion earlier, and it was that Alberta, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan grow approximately exported forage and turf seed. So that's huge. And I would say that that might be one of those untapped areas in forage. So is there value in forages in agriculture? Absolutely there is. Without forage, our livestock don't have feed. So I don't think that that's the question at hand. I think it's just where's the value in the future? Where's the return on investment for those non-forage users? How do we make that market there for them? Show them that there's opportunity here, increase crop rotations and the benefits of that.
Yeah, I think saying that forage doesn't have value in this room is probably a bad idea. And it doesn't make sense either to say that answer. But on top of that, I think that talking to producers, particularly those without livestock, about the benefits to your soil in the long run is also incredibly helpful. Again, I mentioned that my family doesn't have any livestock anymore. They still like forage because it's good for the seed, or it's good for the soil. So I don't think Brooke is here anymore, but there she is. But she had a really easy time selling my dad more forages in a better variety of alfalfa, because he's going to keep that in his soil. My brother doesn't like livestock anymore. He's going to keep that in his rotation because it's good for it. It's going to reduce long-term inputs. So I think trying to expand our forage crops so that we're not only targeting the livestock producer is going to be important. But that marketing issue is going to keep coming up, because if you've got that forage, those bales sitting around for more than a year, they start getting pretty anxious. So what can we do to make that a bit easier? I don't have the answers for it, but it's going to be pretty important.
Thank you. Okay, in the interest of our time that we have for this session, I think we have room for just one last question, final question for the participants here today, and that is, we talked a lot about the forage strategy and the ideas behind it and all that. So where do you guys think, where do you see the Sask Forage Council moving from here in developing a strategy for the future? Like, what are your thoughts on that? Let's start with that, Marianne.
I know research producers hate surveys, but I think that it's going to be really important to reach out to as many producers as possible to understand what they need. I guess I'm always surprised when a researcher comes to me to ask, do you think your producers would be interested? It's a new idea that we haven't necessarily come across before. And I guess in my mind, I'm thinking about water salinity. When I started this position about 10 years ago, I had a researcher come to me to ask whether or not we would want to do anything in this area, especially in the technology area of water salinity. And I had folks saying, I don't care about salinity in water, it doesn't matter to me. And I think Tracy just gave me a face, because of course it matters. Nevertheless, there wasn't really any research on that side at the time. And I talked to folks in Alberta, and they said, certainly not, this doesn't matter. And that's really changed quite a bit in the past 10 years. So when it comes to forage, we have been working on salinity. I don't think that's going to change, but we still need to talk to producers from a variety of regions to make sure that we are looking at what they need to look at. Yeah.
So in terms of moving forward with the forage strategy, what comes to mind for me is doing that environmental scan so that whatever priorities the strategy is going to focus on, it's going to be complementary, not competing with other strategies that are existing out there. So looking at Ministry of Agriculture, looking at BCRC, all the players in the games who are going to be competing for the same dollars, the same people, the same target audience, maybe not competing, but who are working with that same target audience. What are the complementary focus points? And then choosing what is, using the SMART. What it be specific about what you're going to achieve. How can we be measurable? What is actually attainable? Going through the whole process of ensuring that the things, and this goes back to what Scott mentioned at the very beginning. We have to pick out what we can do. Where there's a forage industry, it's not huge, so we have to capitalize on the people that we have in play. And how are we going to achieve something so that it's going to make a measurable difference for our producers, for our researchers, and for the industry as a whole, and the complementary industries that align with it.
Thank you. So I guess the first thing on this is, speaking for Forage Council, is our intention for this strategy is not a strategy for the Sask Forage Council. It's a strategy for the forage industry in Saskatchewan and the stakeholders in that industry, is what it is. We'd be very, I think, we're very much interested in taking a large role in this. I kind of started this, I shouldn't say that, Scott started this 4 years ago at this meeting, brought it up. So it's sort of been, thinking about it for the last 4 years, and some of the things that, has changed that, that have come on has made it, to me, a bit more clear that we kind of need this. So I think for me, the next steps is a forage strategy needed, and how will it look? Who will be involved? How will it be funded? Who takes the reins? And what is the timeline? So that's sort of, for me, just thinking of where we're at. And then Sask Forage Council as an organization, once this strategy is done, is completed, or if it's completed, we'll probably then look at undertaking strategic planning as an organization to see how best our organization can work with all of the other stakeholders to implement, the recommendations or implement the plan. Just to, maybe as, sort of to be the, look at it as, Sask Forage Council as a group to start kind of bring everybody together and, and figure this out, and then try to implement what's in the plan and keep it rolling.
Kevin, I appreciate very much that the Forage Council sees the value of being the front-facing entity, the organization that carries lead on that process. I think that's brilliant because it challenges you to make sure that you included SCA and the stock growers and the industry organizations as a whole, the seed growers as part of that process. The other one I challenge a little bit is I think it's got to lie with ultimately the province in the end. The province has to buy into this. Right? It to me is the primary source of support for us